The bodies were unrecognizable. Blood pooled beneath shattered glass. 100 bullets tore through the stolen Ford V8, ending the lives of America's most disturbing outlaws. Bonnie Parker, 23, once a waitress, now slumped in the passenger seat with a rifle across her lap. Clyde Barrow, 25, a two-time felon turned revenge-driven killer. For 2 years, they left behind a trail of horrifying crime scenes. Gas station murders, carjackings, kidnappings, bank robberies, and corpses dumped in ditches. Towns whispered their names like legends, but the truth was far more terrifying. They were hunted, hated, addicted to escape. Bonnie was burned so badly, her leg had begun to rot. Clyde couldn't sleep. He saw prison walls in every shadow. And in the end, it wasn't a cop who brought them down. It was someone they trusted, someone who knew their patterns, someone who sold them out for a second chance. Watch the video till the end to find out who betrayed them, how they were really caught, and why they weren't arrested but shot on sight with over 100 rounds. It started with poverty. Nothing to eat, nowhere to hide, just a shack full of siblings learning to steal before they could even spell their names. Clyde Chestnut Barrow was born in 1909 in rural Texas. One of 8 children. No future, no food, just cotton fields and broken promises. By the time he turned 17, Clyde had already tasted jail. First for stealing turkeys, then for hot wiring cars. He wasn't violent yet, but he was learning how to run. Bonnie Elizabeth Parker was born a year later, 1910, in a town called Rowena. Her father died when she was 4. Her mother packed the family and moved them to West Dallas, one of the roughest places in Texas. Bonnie loved writing poems and always dreamed of Hollywood. But dreams didn't pay rent. By 16, she was married to an abusive thief named Roy Thornton. He disappeared into prison and never came back. She never divorced him, but she never waited either. In January 1930, West Dallas, both Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker met through a mutual friend's kitchen. Clyde was 20 and Bonnie was 19. She made hot chocolate for him. He made her laugh. But within weeks, Clyde was arrested again. Thrown into jail. Most people would have walked away, but Bonnie didn't. She smuggled him a pistol, wrapped in a loaf of bread. Clyde used it to break out, but freedom lasted only days. He was hunted down, shackled, and thrown into Eastham Prison Farm. And that's where everything broke. One of the most brutal prisons in the country. There, he was starved, beaten, and sexually assaulted by another inmate. One day, Clyde snapped. He picked up a length of pipe, and by the time the guards arrived, the man who had tormented him was dead. It was never proven, but Clyde changed after that. His mother begged for his release. When he got out in 1932, he wasn't the same man Bonnie had fallen for. The charm was still there, but colder now. Focused. He didn't want money. He wanted revenge. He vowed he would never go back to prison. And if that meant killing anyone who tried to take him, so be it. Bonnie saw it all happening. The shift, the damage, but she stayed. Not because she was forced, but because she wanted to matter to someone. Clyde gave her that. He gave her purpose, fire, escape, even if it meant bleeding for it. And soon she did. What began as chaos soon carried a name. The Barrow Gang. And once the name stuck, so did the blood. Clyde came out of Eastham with a limp, a scar on his soul, and a list of names he wanted buried. He didn't trust anyone except Bonnie. And soon, not even that would be enough. He needed more. In 1932, he brought in William Daniel Jones, just a teenager. Then his older brother Buck Barrow, fresh out of prison with a bullet still in his body. Buck's wife, Blanche, joined too, though she hated guns and prayed they'd all come to their senses. They never did. The robberies started small. A gas station in Dallas. A grocery store in Hillsborough. But with each hit, they grew more aggressive. Bolder. More disturbing. By the time they crossed into Oklahoma, they weren't just stealing cash. They were stealing lives. August 1932. Deputy Eugene Moore approached their car outside a dance hall. Clyde shot him in the head without a word. Jones didn't flinch. And Bonnie just stared straight ahead, As the deputy's body hit the ground, the gang learned to move fast, sleep in shifts, switch cars daily. Clyde favored the Ford V8. Its speed made them ghosts on the highway, uncatchable, unstoppable. But there was no plan, no future, just blood, gas, and adrenaline. March 1933. Buck was out, rejoined his brother with promises of going straight. Instead, he brought everyone to Joplin, Missouri, a quiet apartment above a garage, the perfect hideout, until the neighbors got curious. April 13th. 5 officers surrounded the building. The Barrow Gang didn't wait. They opened fire. Detective Harry McGinnis and Constable Wes Harriman were killed in a storm of bullets. Glass shattered. Shells hit the floor. Blood smeared the walls. The gang escaped again, but what they left behind changed everything. Camera. When police developed the film, the world saw the other side of Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie, holding a pistol, cigar clenched between her teeth, grinning like she had just robbed God. Clyde, leaning on the hood of a car, pistols in his waistband, eyes daring anyone to stop him. They weren't mugshots. They were icons. The media turned them into a phenomenon. Headlines screamed, "Deadly Sweethearts," "Lovers on the Run." Songs were written. Photos splashed across front pages. To the public, they weren't murderers. They were movie stars. But behind the smoke and flashbulbs, the truth was rotting. Bonnie was already injured. Her leg twisted from a crash, the skin infected. Clyde carried her to safety after night. They slept in ditches, bathed in creeks, and ate beans from a can. They were broke, infected, hunted, and the killings weren't over. By the summer of 1933, Bonnie Parker was no longer running. She was limping, barely. It happened in Wellington, Texas. June 10th. Clyde missed a warning sign and crashed the Ford V8 straight through a barricade and into a dry riverbed. The impact wasn't what hurt her. The battery exploded. Acid sprayed across Bonnie's right leg, eating through muscle and skin. She didn't scream. She fell like the dead. The burns were so severe her bones were visible. 3rd degree, untreated, infected. Her skin turned black. Clyde had to carry her like a child. For weeks she couldn't walk, not even crawl. But she refused to stop. By now they had nowhere left to hide. The law was tightening. Towns were too dangerous. Cops weren't just looking to arrest. They were looking to kill. And Clyde? He was ready to go out swinging. He started plotting something bigger. Not a robbery. A message. January 16th, 1934. Eastham Prison Farm. The place that turned Clyde into a brutal killer. They didn't knock. They rammed the gates. With Henry Methvin and Jones by his side, Clyde stormed the prison in broad daylight. They killed a guard, Major Joe Crowson, and freed multiple inmates, most importantly Henry Methvin. After this shocking incident, the state of Texas declared open war. They weren't chasing Bonnie and Clyde anymore. They were hunting them, shooting on sight. No more second chances. And public opinion flipped in one day. April 1st, 1934. Grapevine, Texas. Easter Sunday. 2 state troopers, Edward Wheeler and H.D. Murphy, was gunned down on patrol. Execution style. One of them was just 22, engaged, about to be married. Witnesses said Bonnie laughed during the ambush. Others said she was screaming at Clyde to stop. The truth? No one knows. But the headlines were clear. Inhuman murderers. Killers without souls. Then came April 6th. Commerce, Oklahoma. Police Chief Percy Boyd was shot during another chaotic gunfight. He survived. But Jones later claimed he was told to finish him off and refused. Even among killers, there were lines. But Clyde didn't see lines anymore. He saw threats. Every face was a potential snitch. Every car is a trap. He shaved his eyebrows, ditched his hat. He barely slept. Bonnie's leg was now gangrenous, flesh literally rotting. They shared aspirin, not meals. The gang was falling apart. And one member was about to trade loyalty for survival. By spring of 1934, Bonnie and Clyde weren't just outlaws. They were targets. Every state line was a death sentence waiting to happen. Every newspaper printed their faces like wanted posters. And law enforcement wasn't playing catch-up anymore. They were setting the board. A former Texas Ranger with a reputation for tracking men who didn't want to be found. He didn't believe in arrests. He believed in ending problems. The state gave him one mission: find Bonnie and Clyde and make sure they never walked away again. He didn't work alone. Hamer built a team of trackers from Texas and Louisiana with experienced officers who could cross borders and disappear into the woods like hunters. They studied maps, patterns, gas receipts, witness statements, and one name kept showing up: Henry Methvin. The same man Clyde had risked everything to free from Eastham. Methvin was reckless, sloppy, and dangerous. But the real problem wasn't Henry. It was his father, Ivy Methvin. He knew exactly where his son was hiding. And when Frank Hamer showed up at his door, Ivy was offered a choice: help the police, or watch your son die in the electric chair. Ivy told police that Bonnie and Clyde were coming. They were planning to meet Henry on a quiet road near Gippsland, Louisiana. One final pickup, one last ride. And that's where the trap was set. May 23, 1934. Dawn. 6 officers hid in the brush off Highway 154. Ivy's car was staged as a decoy, broken down on the side of the road. Bonnie and Clyde had a habit: they always slowed down for friends. And that morning, they did exactly what the officers hoped they would. At 9:15 a.m., their Ford V8 appeared over the hill. Clyde spotted the familiar car. He eased up. No warning, no surrender. The officers opened fire. Rifles, shotguns, pistols. Over 130 rounds in less than 16 seconds. Clyde was hit first. His foot slipped off the brake. Bonnie screamed. They didn't have a chance to draw their weapons. They didn't even move. Bullets tore through the windshield, the doors, the seats, their bodies. The Ford V8 kept rolling, then slumped to a stop in the ditch. Bonnie was struck at least 26 times. Clyde at least 17. When officers finally approached, they weren't checking for survivors. They were checking for trophies. The sound of gunfire had barely faded when the cameras arrived. The bodies were still slumped in the car. Bonnie's hair soaked in blood. Clyde's head nearly detached. Locals picked through the wreckage. Souvenir hunters stole locks of hair, ripped pieces of their clothes. One man tried to cut off Clyde's trigger finger. Officers posed beside the bullet-riddled Ford like hunters beside a carcass. The media turned it into a theater. Photographs of Bonnie's dead body hit front pages nationwide. The headline read, "The End of the Road." Another said, "Justice with a Vengeance." But for the families, there was no justice, just a spectacle. Bonnie's mother begged for her to be buried next to Clyde. The request was denied. Even in death, they were separated. Crown Hill Memorial Park. Thousands came to the funerals. Thousands more visited the car, now riddled with over 100 bullet holes when it went on tour. It sits today behind glass in a Nevada casino, frozen in time. As for the others, William Daniel Jones was arrested and sentenced to 15 years. He got out early but couldn't outrun his past. In 1974, he was shot and killed during a bar fight. Blanche Barrow lost her eye in a shootout. She served 6 years and lived the rest of her life quietly under a different name. She died in 1988, still haunted by the choices she didn't make. Henry Methvin was pardoned for helping set the trap. But in 1948, he was struck and killed by a train. Some say it was an accident. Others say it was revenge. The Barrow Gang was gone. But decades later, Hollywood stepped in. In 1967, Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway starred in Bonnie and Clyde. It was romantic, stylish, bloody. It didn't tell the full truth, but it cemented their image as rebels, lovers, icons. Pop stars sang about them. Kids dressed as them. They became Halloween costumes and lyrics in rap songs. But beneath the fantasy, the real story was always darker. They killed at least 13 people, shot police officers in cold blood, kidnapped civilians, burned through towns like a disease. People still argue over who Bonnie and Clyde really were. Lovers or killers, victims or villains. The truth? They were all of it. Rest in peace to every innocent life taken. Subscribe for more